Good morning and welcome to Rising. Happy Wednesday. We've got another great show for you today. Niall is back in the hot seat looking gregarious in green.
I like the alliteration, Robbie. I am back from a few days off. I was in Miami where I had a great time and I'm now refreshed and lots of news to get to as always.
Yes,
so
indeed.
Let's kick it off. What is on your radar, Robbie?
Lots of foreign policy to discuss today. We will start with Iran. President Donald Trump ordered the Treasury Department to resume maximum economic pressure against Iran on Tuesday with the aim of discouraging the Iranian government from pursuing nuclear weapons. Now, what made headlines, of course, was Trump's contention that Iran would be, quote, obliterated if they made the mistake of assassinating Trump or some other top U.S. official. Let's watch.
Why say that you're unhappy to sign it if it's Iran and their proxies who have threatened to retaliate against you and your team by killing you guys for taking out Soleimani?
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do, not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left. And they shouldn't be able to do it. And Biden should have said that, but he never did. I don't know why, lack of intelligence, perhaps. But he never said it. If that happens to a leader, or close to a leader, frankly, if you had other people involved also, you would call for total obliteration of a state that did it. That would include Iran.
Now, headlines predictably emphasized those remarks from Trump as if there was something unusual or militaristic about them. But, of course, the U.S. would retaliate against a nation that took out our president. That's not surprising at all. We would do it, frankly, regardless of whether it was specifically set up by the president in question. The U.S. is not going to sit back meekly and defenselessly in the face of such a brazen, hypothetical attack. So that's not really news. What is news is that Trump does not actually want to inflame tensions with Iran. That was missed by the mainstream media, but it's a fact. Here he was making remarks just before the line about obliteration, in which he laments the reimposition of sanctions and asserts that he hopes we never actually have to go there.
We would have never had the problem. You would have never had October 7th. We would have never had the problem had the election gone a different way, which it should have. But this one, I think, more than made up for it. I think we're doing things, and it shows that more than made up for it, much more historic. The Iran situation, hopefully, I'm going to sign it, but hopefully we're not going to have to use it very much. We will see whether or not we can arrange or work out a deal with Iran, and everybody can live together, and maybe that's possible, and maybe it's not possible. So I'm signing this, and I'm unhappy to do it, but I really have not so much choice because we have to be strong and firm, and I hope that it's not going to have to be used in any great measure at all. It'd be great if we could have a Middle East and maybe a world at total peace.
Now, that's a very different message than what you would casually assume if all you had read were the headlines assuring readers that Trump is promising massive destruction, even obliteration of Iran. On the contrary, Trump is reluctant to impose any sanctions on Iran. He wants peace between not just the U.S. and Iran, but peace in the Middle East and all over the globe. That's a good thing. Too often, U.S. foreign policy has been guided by people, both Democrats and Republicans, who see militarism as a first resort. Trump obviously has hawks in his own party, people like Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, Mitch McConnell. Those people have a reflexive appetite for conflict. Trump does not. He has a reflexive appetite for deal-making. Now let's see if the U.S. and Iran can get a good one. So, I saw the headlines about this, emphasizing, of course, the line about obliteration because it's typically Trumpy, that kind of thing. And, it's not... There's nothing weird about him saying, well, yeah, if they killed me, we would respond massively. That's a weird hypothetical to even ask the president. But if you read between the lines, what he's saying is that he would really like to have a deal with Iran and not have this increasing friction between the two countries. And I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah, I think on one hand, it is totally fair to draw attention to the fact that the obliteration quote got all the headlines and the clip that we just played got very few headlines. And you could certainly argue that the clip we just played maybe is more substantive. He's really arguing there that he doesn't really want to see this maximal pressure or maximum pressure applied to Iran. I think two things that I would cut against that slightly. I do think when you use terms like obliteration, someone like Trump, who knows how to command headlines, knows those kind of words are going to attract attention and knows that it is part of, I think, what he feels to be a sort of sign of muscularity in international relations. But the other point is, I guess I have some problems with seeing him as a peacemaker in relation to Iran specifically. I do agree that he is much less instinctively interventionist than a lot of people in the Republican Party. You mentioned Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham, people like that, who do want to get involved in lots of places overseas. But it was Trump who pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in 2018. It was also Trump who ordered the killing of Qasem Soleimani in 2020, the leader of the Quds Force. That second killing is why people like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo were under death threats. There was the whole related controversy where Trump pulled their Secret Service protection. So I think in relation to Iran, there are actually questions about whether he strikes a more overall belligerent tone than he does in some other places.
Well, there is definitely true that during Trump administration number one, I think sometimes his less hawkish instincts were overtaken by the fact that he was still surrounded by a lot of traditional Republican neoconservatives, like the people you just mentioned, like Mike Pompeo, like John Bolton. He earned, I think, rare criticism from MAGA world, including from Tucker Carlson, over the assassination of Soleimani. I remember when Tucker at the time was anchoring Fox News, said that that was a big mistake, and had on guests that said that. The question is whether Trump's second term, which will be guided by his own instincts. Now, I say that, but he put Marco Rubio in charge of the State Department, who really does come from that more traditionalist neoconservative wing, but we'll see. But I think it's refreshing to hear those things, to hear, it seems to be the thread with the tariffs as well. Saying that if you don't, make a deal with us to fall in line with American policy, you're going to be hit with these massive tariffs. But we don't actually want to do it, and there seems to be a recognition that this would be harmful to the U.S. as well. And so it's in the threats are in service of getting better relations. And you can critique that tactic, but it's very different from so many in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, some in the Democratic Party, who are like, no, we can't do business with these people. We need to. The point of the pressure is to eventually erode and wipe out that regime. Then people of my own foreign policy and your foreign policy say, well, can we really even do that? Would that be worth doing? How much pain does that cause us? Will the next people be just as bad? We start asking all those questions you're not supposed to ask when you're just in that bipartisan centrist neoconservative mold. I
do agree that Trump tonally can be quite different from the very hawkish Republicans, for sure. Now, for people who are now screaming at their computer screen or TV screen watching this, we have not forgotten about Gaza, and we will address that in the next segment because I do think that's a different point. But in relation to this and in relation to Iran, yes, it is certainly unusual to hear someone like Trump, who I think is often belligerent in his domestic rhetoric, being a bit less so in relation to Iran in this case.
Yes, indeed. We have not forgotten about Gaza. An interesting proposal was discussed yesterday. Niall has some thoughts on that, so stay tuned for Niall's Note.